Hi everyone, my name is Kathleen Rao and I'm a psychological wellbeing practitioner at Harrow Talking Therapies. So what that means is that I work with and support individuals who might be experiencing symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, panic or stress. Now, in these workshops, we're going to be looking at ways to maintain our wellbeing, thinking more in particular about ways to manage stress, depression, anxiety and sleep. And with that, we're going to be looking at symptoms of each of these and spend some time exploring strategies and techniques to manage in more helpful ways in order to maintain well-being. Now, in this session, we're going to be looking at anxiety, specifically sort of symptoms of anxiety, why we start to experience anxiety, and then more healthy and helpful coping mechanisms for anxiety. So firstly, just to think about the symptoms of anxiety. Now, anxiety, it can manifest itself in quite a lot of different ways, both physically and mentally. A main symptom that we tend to see with people is that they spend an increased amount of time in the day worrying. So they'll be worrying about the future, worrying about people around them, worrying about health, and so on. Now, with teachers, this is really prominent, sort of worrying about their students, worrying about the future of their students, worrying about the amount of work that they have to do at the moment, worrying about meeting deadlines. There's lots of worries that normally come with being a teacher that are even sort of heightened and ramped up now as a result of the pandemic. Now, what happens when we worry is that it often leads an individual to reach the worst case future scenario. So we just jump to that worst case and it really leaves us feeling quite panicky and quite fearful. Now, in order to alleviate that anxiety, what we might start doing is seeking reassurance from people around them. We might avoid doing things that might make us feel quite anxious, or a really common one that we see in teachers is spending a lot more time planning and preparing for all the possible scenarios that could come at us. Now, in that moment, it feels like, oh yeah, I'm organized, I'm ready for everything. But my goodness, in the long run, that's going to be exhausting if you're ready for everything. Now, on top of these anxious thoughts, what also happens is that we might start to notice physical symptoms of anxiety in our body. So often when individuals experience anxiety, they'll say they noticed physical symptoms like their heart beating faster, shortness of breath, tingling, dizziness, excessive sweating, just lots of unpleasant physical symptoms. And there's a reason that these symptoms start happening. Now, these physical symptoms are a result of something called the fight or flight response. Now, you might have a bit of an idea of what the fight or flight response is, but it plays a really important part in anxiety. So the fight or flight response is a wonderful response, and it's been inbuilt with us since sort of cave times. So back in the caveman times, back in the day when our ancestors, they had to go out, they had to hunt for their food, they needed the fight or flight system. But what happens when this system response is triggered? So when the fight or flight response is triggered, our mind is perceiving something around us as threatening or as dangerous. And so as a result of this threat, the brain sends a message to the body and it kickstarts some adrenaline being sent around the body in order to prepare us to either fight something or to run away from it. So there's reasons for all of the physical responses that we start to notice. Our hearts might start beating faster, and that's so there's more blood pumping around our body, therefore enabling us to run faster, get away from what we need to. We might also notice our pupils dilating, but that actually enables us to focus more in on our threat and really see what's going on. Another thing might be that we might have a sudden urge to go to the toilet. Again, it's allowing us to empty our body of any unnecessary weight in order to enable us to be as light on our feet as possible and either run away or fight something. Now, this is all very helpful. Well, sort of helpful in the caveman situation when you might have to, run away from a lion whilst out trying to catch your food or fight another person to survive. All of that's very helpful. But what's happened over the years, our brains have become overly sensitive to things that it perceives as threatening around us. It's a bit like an oversensitive fire alarm going off when it just smells toast, when it smells the toast slightly burning, that alarm's going off, even though there's no fire. When we start to feel anxious or we're worrying about things, our brain perceives that as threatening. So the fight or flight response is triggered. But in this instance, we have nothing to fight and nothing to run away from. So those physical symptoms, they're not helpful in that situation. So we're left with a pounding heart, we're left feeling really breathless, but we have no reason to use them. Now, how do you think that's going to impact you when you're already feeling anxious? The likelihood is it's probably going to make it worse, perhaps lead to you feeling even more anxious. And now, additionally, you might even be worried about your physical health. Why is this happening? Am I having a heart attack? Is this ever going to stop? So that anxiety keeps going round. But why do we allow ourselves to get into such anxious states? Well, actually, we know that people begin to feel anxious and will worry about things when they're uncertain, when they're unpredictable, and when they're uncontrollable. Now, all three of these points are extremely relevant in the current pandemic, a time of complete uncertainty, complete unpredictability, and where we all have a lack of control. Now, what happens is we begin to worry about what might happen, often starting to have what we call what-if worries about the future. What if my students don't pass the year? What if I don't get all these lessons out on time? And again, then spending a lot more time in the day worrying about things than you ever did before. But why? When things are really uncertain, worrying can seem helpful. It can seem like it's preparing you for the worst situation. It can seem like it's motivating you to take action, to do something, or it can seem like it's preventing the worst thing from happening. Now, all of this, it reduces the feelings of uncertainty about the future. So in that moment, it temporarily makes you feel better. So because it's making us feel better, we continue to worry because it gives us that feeling of being in control. But the big question to ask yourself is, has worrying about the future changed anything or given you any more control of the future in comparison to what you already have? More often than not, the answer is no. So despite the initial comfort in worrying, the anxiety is still there. So what we do when that anxiety comes back, we go back to worrying some more. We feel a little better, but then it comes back again. And the cycle continues to go round and round. So what we really need to be able to do is just to tolerate the uncertainty that life is going to have and learn more helpful ways of managing aside from worrying. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel anxious or you shouldn't worry at all. Worrying can be really helpful in some situations, but it's about sort of dialing it down so you're not spending so much of your day worrying about things and feeling anxious. So in order to talk to you a little bit more about that, I'm now going to hand over to Annie from the Wish Centre, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about managing worry and managing anxiety.
Hi, my name is Annie and I work for the Wish Centre, and following on from that information you've just received, I'm going to be talking through a couple of tools and strategies that you can use for yourself or perhaps with other people who are struggling with anxiety at the moment. So just as an overview, anxiety, it's really common. It can present at any age. I think often, especially if you are working in education, you'll be thinking of young people who are struggling with anxiety, but anxiety can affect people at any age. So it's more around the impact that it's having on a person's life, and if it's sort of affecting those day-to-day activities, that might then lead on to a diagnosis, but it doesn't make how you are feeling or what you're experiencing any less valid just because you don't have a clinical diagnosis of anxiety disorder. And really what we're looking for is the frequency of the anxiety, the severity of it, and the duration of it. So like I said, if it's really impacting a person's day-to-day life or it's becoming quite disabling, then it would be in that scenario that you might go on to get maybe some medical help, maybe see your GP. But I'll talk a little bit about some of the places you can go to for support later on. So this is a graph that is showing how people have struggled with anxiety since the beginning of the lockdown. And if you look, it is really going up and down. Obviously, our anxiety levels are going to be changing all of the time at the moment. It might be when new information comes out. It might have been when rates of COVID have gone up and down. But as you can see, it's really common, and it's being quite a common response as well to the pandemic. So at Wish, our therapists most often see people experiencing anxiety about the past or about the future. And during the pandemic, future anxiety has obviously especially increased due to the uncertainty of future events. So when we're not feeling in control of things that are happening around the pandemic, anxiety is, it's quite a fair response really to some of those things. So looking at some different tips and strategies now, you may have heard of grounding techniques before, and then this is a really good grounding technique, and it's a really simple one. It's easy to remember, and it's really good if you are either just feeling anxious or if you're feeling not very present in your body, and it's also good if you're someone who is prone to panic attacks. This is a really good way to kind of prevent a panic attack from escalating. So you're going to use your hand and the senses. You're going to acknowledge 5 things that you see around you, acknowledge 4 things that you can touch around you, acknowledge 3 things that you can hear, acknowledge 2 things that you can smell, and acknowledge 1 thing that you can taste. And that's really sort of a distraction technique, but also to make you be really present in the moment of your surroundings. And that could be really grounding. And the next thing we're going to look at is a body scan. So this is about identifying where in your body you're experiencing anxiety. So you're going to want to get comfortable. Lying down is preferable, particularly if you're doing a body scan meditation before you fall asleep, but you might choose to sit on a chair or sit on the floor. But really, if you're going to sit on a chair, I'd suggest that your feet touch the ground. And when you lay down as well, you might find it more comfortable to sort of lift your knees up and have your feet flat on the ground to feel more grounded. So you're going to take a few deep breaths. You can take as many as you need, and bring awareness to your feet. Breathe into the tension and then scan your entire body. And what we mean by that is just going from part to part of your body. So you might start at the feet, work up through the legs, the upper body, the chest, the neck, the head, and just really reflect and think about, while still breathing, think about where you're holding that anxiety. So for example, you might feel a tension in your back and in your chest that you didn't notice before. And as well, you can look into why you might be feeling anxiety in that certain area in your body. So next we're going to do focusing. So you can ask that area of your body a question. So like I said, if it was in your chest, you might ask your chest, is this about work? And it's important to be really patient with yourself and look for feedback. So when you ask that question, what is your body telling you? It's very individual, all of these different techniques. It's about finding what works for you and practicing as well. You might not be able to, you might not find feedback straight away, so do keep trying. So the next thing we're going to talk about is positive self-talk. Positive self-talk is one of these things that can sound a little bit odd to you if you're not used to it, but it does work. So any sort of affirmations, you can get affirmation cards online if that's the kind of thing, if you're more of a visual person, but these are a few phrases that really work. I'm doing my best and that's good enough. I can't control this, but I can control how I feel about it. This feeling will pass. And I'm sure already you can think of moments where you maybe needed to hear that. And sometimes we say to our young people, our service users, what would you say to a friend or someone close to you that's feeling this right now? You know, we're not feeling in control. We might sometimes feel inadequate because there's so many things we can't change at the moment. And just think of what you might say to somebody else feeling the way you are, because you really are doing your best at the moment. So then we're going to talk about shifting. So shifting is about moving that anxious energy. So your anxiety might feel a certain way. I think for me, my anxiety, it feels, if I imagined it as a visual thing, it would be kind of like zigzaggy lines. It'd be quite messy and it would be quite heavy as well. So you're really thinking about shifting that anxious energy. So if we're working from home or you're working at a desk, you might be sitting still for quite a lot of time in the day. You might not really have time to get out of the house and go for a walk, but it's important to just keep moving around. So stand up, stretch, do some exercise, maybe watch a few minute YouTube video to just keep your body moving a little bit, and just try and shake, sometimes even massaging your hands or just shaking your hands, shaking your arms can really help shift some of that anxious energy. So really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to manage, accept and be with the anxiety rather than sweeping it under the rug, rather than ignoring it completely. You know, there's nothing wrong with experiencing anxiety, especially at the moment. Like I said, it's a very natural response to a lack of control. So it's about mastering that anxiety. So another technique that works is you can decide when in the day you're going to be anxious. It's normal that you're experiencing anxiety at the moment, but to feel anxious all day and for it to control everything you're doing that day, it's not going to make you feel any better. So you can you can allot some time in your timetable. You can say at 3 o'clock, I'm going to have my worry time. I'm going to have my anxious time. And for 20 minutes, I'm going to think about what I'm feeling anxious about and why. So you could maybe use the grounding techniques, or you might just want to sit there and think about it. Or you might want to write it down. It's really up to you, but you're allotting that time, so you've got that time to kind of get the anxiety out, but it's not going to cloud your whole day. And anything that comes up, you can think, it's fine, I'm going to think about it at 3 o'clock. So self-care, I'm sure, is something you are very familiar with, but it's, again, super important for anxiety. Anxiety can be exhausting as well, because if you're thinking about 100 things at once, you're going to burn out very quickly. So just a couple of ones that some people find helpful. Journaling, like we said, writing out those anxious thoughts, thinking about how realistic they are, best and worst case scenario. Drawing, doodling. Doodling should not be underestimated. It can be so helpful. Calling a friend, you might want to talk about something completely random. You might want to have gossip. You might just want to offload. It's, again, up to you. Watching TV, so whether that is watching a bit of reality TV or it is watching your favourite programme, or as some people really like, documentaries, that kind of distraction can be so good for your headspace. Listening to music, going for a walk or a run or exercising, again, shifting that anxious energy. And also mindfulness. So similar to some of the grounding techniques, mindfulness is about coming back into your body and feeling very present. So then looking at help and support. It's really important at the moment that you speak to your colleagues for support. Everyone is going through similar things, different things, bereavements, anxiety. It's so important right now that we lean on each other. If you've got some time during the week, schedule in a cup of tea with one of your colleagues, or you might create something more formal, like a bit of a peer support group at work where staff can share stuff they're concerned about at school, and it's all about just hearing each other out. We also have Mind in Harrow, and they have a helpline from Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, and the number is here. You can use that in whatever way you need to. And they will have really good tips and advice, or just to listen to you as well. There's also the Help Harrow portal, which is a website that will signpost you to any relevant services. And like I said before, if it's becoming detrimental to your day, do contact your GP. They are there to support you. And you can go down whatever route works for you, whether that is therapy, medication, CBT. There are options out there. So just a couple of websites and apps. There are loads out there which can be quite overwhelming. These are a couple that we know work well. So there's the Headspace app. There's the Calm app, which is especially meant to help with sleep. On mind.org.uk, there's loads of different resources and advice and information. And also Be Mindful online. You can do courses in mindfulness and really train yourself on how to manage that anxiety. And finally, as well, some of your anxiety might be around some of the students that you have at the moment, and that's fine. So I just wanted to remind you all today that we do have some resources for young people to help you work with young people on our website, and there's just some instructions there. So takeaways, I really would like you now to get a piece of paper or to just sit and reflect and think about how you are going to put this into practice. Spend about 10 minutes now and figure out what you are going to do, what time you are going to commit to yourself. If you think about the cup analogy, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's really about looking after you, self-care, setting those boundaries, putting in that worry time, grounding yourself so that you don't burn out and so that you can give what you want to give into everything else that you're doing. Thank you for listening, and I hope that's been helpful. And by all means, have a look at our website for signposting information. Thank you.